Welcome to this session today on fake news. My name is Angela. I work at Onkaparinga Libraries, and with me today I have Jacinta. Hi, Jacinta.
Hello, everyone.
So about, I'd say, 6 to 7, or actually before COVID, I really wanted to do something on fake news, and then obviously COVID hit and it was all put on the back burner. But then I thought, well, why don't we just do something online? So this is where this presentation has come from. There is some links and some YouTube clips and things like that, which after the event I will send to people because we're not going to do them live, and then people can view them in their own homes or schools or wherever they're viewing it. So, and also I can send notes, so there's no need to take copious amounts of notes. Interestingly, when I started doing my research on fake news, I felt a bit like Alice going down the rabbit hole because there is so much information out there, and it's quite broad what fake news is. So hopefully at the end of this session today, people will have a better idea of what actually is fake news. It's not all about Donald Trump all the time. So with that, if you have any questions, you can ask them in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen or in the chat, and Jacinta will convey them questions to me. I will be sharing a screen, so you won't see us, you'll just see the PowerPoint presentation, but Jacinta will interrupt me at any point to ask any questions. So without further ado, I will now share my screen for you. And don't forget to ask those questions. Thank you. Okay, so fake news is not a new phenomenon. It is quite a bit like old, really. When you think about in World War II, the people that used propaganda, that was a type of fake news. So it was used in the war to gee everyone up and lift morale, but it is a form of fake news, and it was previously used throughout history at different times. So we'll go into that a bit later. But what makes fake news worse now is the rise of social media. So a fake news story, a meme, an image or video can be created and inadvertently shared thousands of times. It just takes one person to share it, their friends see it, and then because it comes from a friend, their defenses are down and you have more trust in the source. They go on to share it, and these, what we call atoms, rocket through the information ecosystem at high speed, powered by trusted peer-to-peer networks. So it's often spread because we trust the people it's coming from, or we've got lack of time to check the story out where it's coming from, and things like that. So with really little effort from the creator, the news is spread. So it's quite mind-boggling when you consider that 188 million emails are sent every minute, as you can see by that image. It was the 2019, which is only last year. It's probably gone up quite a lot since then. We're overrun with information and data coming at us from all angles. So you can see why fake news is such a problem today. It's a lot easier to share and distribute fake news online rather than years ago when you had to do it through printed matter and, you know, trying to infiltrate the news system, which is always harder to do. This graph shows, it's interesting, it looks at our generations and how people are receiving their news. This was put together in 2017, this graph, but it shows the blue line represents the total internet usage, and the red line pulls out the social media usage, which is Facebook and Twitter and things like that. So the blue line is the newspaper and other printed matter, and the green is obviously the radio, and the purple is the free-to-air TV. It's interesting that TV is still a main source of news for people born up until around 1975. After this date, the internet seems to take over. Social media has become the main source of news online for 64% of us, which you can see why we've got a bit of a problem with fake news because of these stats. Most people, when they're looking at fake news or actually looking at any news on their news feed, all often it's Facebook, their Facebook feed, they'll just scroll through. So people are really good at scrolling these days. And the problem with that is if you're looking at any type of news, when you scroll, you very rarely click on that article and read the whole article. So you're only really getting bits of news. You're not actually sitting down to, reading your newspaper with your cup of tea in the morning and getting all the news. You're scrolling and you're getting bits, bite-sized pieces of news from all over the place, which is also one of the contributing factors to fake news being spread. Most people only read 15 seconds or less of an article online. And with a video, it's only 10 seconds or less. So it's even worse for video. And it's pretty scary to think that 49% of our young people get their news from Instagram and Facebook. I often find myself reading something, I'm like, oh, this is a good article, and then I'll go and find the real article to read, but I've seen it on Facebook first, which is always a bit scary. So really, when you think of how news is shared on, especially I'm talking mainly Facebook here, but when you look at how it's shared from friends. So when you think about it, our social media friends, what we call our friends, they've become our managing editors of our news. So our friends are getting to decide what we see, which is quite tricky because you might only get one viewpoint. If your friend only has a certain viewpoint, you'll see things they share or things they're clicking on. So we're getting a very biased view. We're not getting the full news story or different viewpoints, which makes the world go round, having all these viewpoints that you can discussion as well, like a lot of discussion when you have social functions and you discuss the latest news. You can see in the future that might die out if you're only getting a biased view of what you believe in or what your friends believe in. There's no one to go against what you're saying or challenge your thoughts. So what is fake news? Well, fake news is an umbrella term that covers a lot of different types of information. The Cambridge, if you look online, Cambridge will say false stories that appear to be news spread on the internet or using other media. Wikipedia will say fake news is untrue information presented as news. It often has the aim of damaging the reputation of a person, entity, or making money through advertising revenue. And Webster just says fake news is news that is untrue. There are so many definitions out there, and they're all correct. After today's session, I'm hoping you will understand more about the different types of fake news and what the intent of the fake news is as well, because that's just as important sometimes. So one way fake news is spread is by having a real photo or video of an event, but changing the story to match the current story. This is called misrepresentation. Even if it's called out and taken down, the damage is often already done with people believing it to be fact. These often pop up more in times of crisis. For example, earlier in the year when the bushfires were on, there was a photo of a kangaroo hugging someone, and the caption read, "Kangaroo cannot stop hugging person that rescued her." In fact, the picture that was used was taken a couple of months earlier in a wildlife sanctuary, and the person that was in the picture did not share it in this way, but the image was used in this way. So even though this person denied it and tried to say this is fake news, the damage was already done because images unfortunately do speak louder than words, and that image had got out there and went viral and it took on a life of its own. even without the woman's knowledge, which is very unfortunate. There's lots of things like that happen, but they do seem to be more prevalent when we're in a time of stress like COVID or bushfires and things like that. So when we look at how we can explore and analyse fake news, in these images here that you will see, these are all pictures that have gone viral at some point. So the first one shows an image of Chris Hadfield, who is a NASA astronaut. He's holding a bag of marijuana in that first picture, but in the real picture, it was balls, and someone's photoshopped it to say it's marijuana. This was posted on a Facebook page called Pictures in History in November 2018, with a caption saying an astronaut testing the effects of drugs in space. But it's actually, it wasn't balls, it was Easter eggs. And you can probably see the shape of the eggs there, they're Easter eggs. So it was a total bogus picture that had been doctored. So if you see that second one, we do have a big environmental problem in our world today. And the second one was one picture. But what they did is they made it look like it was split in half, put different dates on it. So people thought that that's what that forest now looked like, where in fact it was just the edge of the forest. And the third picture, which is a really good picture of how your perceptions change, is the first image looks like the man's got the gun to his head. The last image, or the middle image, shows him with the gun and the water, and then the third one is just the water. So you can see by cropping an image, you can really change public's perception of what that picture is. So that's what happened in that one. And then there's lots of like things out there to how to stop fake news. Like you can look at the source, read different platforms. Like if you've seen something on Facebook, then click on Google or a different platform and try and see if make sure the story's not bogus. So these are all good examples of how you can manipulate an image to give you a viewpoint and change the perception of the public. And as I've said before, images do speak louder than words. So there is also one really good tool you can use, which Jacinta's going to demonstrate a bit later on. It's called reverse imaging or Google Images, where you can actually plonk an image into Google and it will give you information about how that picture's been used. So we will do that a bit later in this chat. Don't forget, if you've got any questions, you can put them in the Q&A and Jacinta will let me know what the questions are. So fake news, as I said earlier, fake news has been around forever, but it's a lot worse today. It's a lot harder to spot. So there's been some really famous cases of fake news, which I thought I'd look into. I don't know, I wasn't around at this time, but in 1938, the War of the Worlds radio drama. People actually believed we were being invaded by aliens when War of the Worlds was broadcast on the radio. That caused mass hysteria. Then there's the annual spaghetti harvest in Switzerland in 1957, where people were seen to be harvesting spaghetti. If you look that up, it really happened on the internet. There's also the marshmallow harvest in 2012, and people believe this too. Obviously, though, these all fall under the heading of entertainment, but what about other stories that have a different purpose? In the 1700s, some newspapers printed fake news, reporting that King George II was ill. This was deliberately done in an attempt to destabilise the establishment. In Jack the Ripper's reign in London in 1988, some newspaper vendors cried out, "Fake news about Jack the Ripper," to sell more papers. And we know about this because the men were charged and they went to court. But the charges were dismissed because, you know, obviously it was probably hard to prove. It was just their word against ours. But there is court documentation that they did go to court for they were just trying to sell more newspapers, because obviously newspapers were a bit slow and they needed money to probably eat. So they were just trying to generate some interest. So fake news is created for a lot of different reasons. Some spread for political advantage, while others is spread for financial gain. Other fake news stories are just for entertainment. Some stories come about by mistake, while others, there is an act of desperation. That's like with the newspaper vendors. So we're going to look at some different types of misinformation or fake news, because you'll by the end of this session, you will understand that fake news has lots of connotations and it means lots of different things. I'll just go to the next page. So these are 7 of the main types of misinformation. So you have the false connection, where someone famous is linked to a story through a quote or a photo with the aim of giving the story more credibility, even if that person has never endorsed the product. Another way that false connection is emerging is through social media. For some reason, we tend to share and connect with strangers, where in real life we would be a lot more cautious. This gives us a false sense of connection with people we really don't know, but they are our Facebook friends. This connection is also affecting how we communicate with each other and how we interpret messages that we receive. For example, if you saw that your Facebook friend had posted on Facebook that the sky was falling in or something like that, you would probably assume they were having a personal crisis or a really bad day. But even if you were to hear the same message on the news, you would be more concerned. So where the news comes from, if it's a friend or if it's a newspaper or the television, your brain interprets it totally different because of where it's come from and your perception and your prejudices against different newspapers and people and friends. And so your brain interprets, even if it's the same message, interprets it differently depending on where it's come from. That's all part of that false connection. False context is when a news item happens and a story or picture is used from another time. This is what happened with the kangaroo and the person hugging the kangaroo. The story went viral. The images was real, but it was incorrectly used. And then you've got manipulated content, where pictures are cropped or photoshopped, as we just saw before. It's often very one-sided. You're trying to deceive or change the perceptions of the public. And that obviously that's easy to do now with social media, because you can do it all on your computer. And as I said before, newspapers are a lot harder to manipulate. Satire is a technique employed to expose and criticize foolishness and corruption of an individual or society. They do this through humor or ridicule. These often include memes, and they get shared on social media. But unfortunately, we always have a small cohort of people that believe it, which is unfortunate. We have misleading content. This is often unsubstantiated and usually comes with free offers or price promises, misleading ads and promotion of third-party products and services. A lot of diet sites are misleading. I'm sure you've all seen those things like, this person lost 500 kilos and you can too. And it's, most of the time, all the time, it's probably bogus. People do lose lots of weight, but it's usually with hard work. Nothing on these Facebook pages that pop up onto your screens is going to be a magic pill for you. And then we've got imposter content. These are all real issues associated with journalists. They often have bylines used alongside articles they did not write, or organisations' logos used with them as well. So it looks real, but you can tell usually it's not. The logo might be a bit off. There might be spelling errors, different things like that. And then obviously fabricated content is just totally 100% false. It's designed to deceive. and do harm to the people reading it. So all fake news have one thing in common. Well, they have many things in common, but mostly it's about misinformation and totally fake, and it's all intended to mislead the reader. So that's a big thing to remember. Everything is misleading. It can be done in jest, can be done as a joke, but it ultimately is all misleading. So the characteristics of fake news, this is quite important most news, a lot of news can be upsetting, but the characteristics of fake news is sensational headlines. It's a tactic used in mass media to get you to look at their article first. The words are selected to excite the greatest number of readers and viewers. This biased impression of events, it's not neutral, so it can be very one-sided, and it definitely causes a manipulation of the truth. The conspiracy theories, this is a good way to distract the reader from the truth. There are a lot of conspiracy theories out there, some more believable than others. You know, we've all probably heard the conspiracy theory that Princess Diana didn't die in a car crash, that she was murdered, or that MH170 crashed into the ocean. Did it crash, or was it rebadged as MH117 and later shot down over Ukraine? There's a really funny one I read that Stevie Wonder isn't blind. So they're really obvious. I think most of them are pretty obvious conspiracy theories, but some of them can be quite subtle, and it's hard to differentiate between a conspiracy theory and the truth. Pseudoscience is a very interesting one because it's a set of ideas that presents itself as science, and while it does not meet the criteria to be called science, so it can't be proven. So this is a bit of a controversial one, I suppose, because examples of pseudoscience, the 2012 Doomsday Scare, crop circles, the Bermuda Triangle. There's a lot of people that do believe in all of that, but because it hasn't been proven, it's more of a it fits into the realm of pseudoscience. So anything that's paranormal sort of fits into this area, which loads of people do believe in the paranormal and ghosts and things, but there's not been any definitive proof, and science, unfortunately, does need proof, and that's pseudoscience. And you can see that on a lot of websites. We'll show you maybe a bit later. You can really tell them types of pages because a lot of their stories look quite preposterous. Then you've got propaganda. This is often biased in nature, used to promote political causes, points of view, or advertisements. Visual propaganda has been used to change the way the world thinks and behaves for thousands of years. These days, thanks to history, it can be used for good, it can be used for bad, but propaganda generally carries a very negative view. But it is effective as well to relay positive messages like health recommendations, wartime efforts. So even though it's got a negative view nowadays, it has been used for good messages in the past. Like the recruitment and encouraging people to vote, that can sort of be a type of propaganda, even though it's for a good cause. It was used a lot in England during the war to keep people's hopes alive. So it's not all bad. And a lot of this, it's just the way it is. The other one I'll talk about is clickbait. I've definitely been a victim of clickbait because I used to click on things that looked interesting, but then I realized it's not a good idea. So clickbait, if you haven't heard that term before, it's designed to get you clicking on things. It tries to get your interest, and the more you click on the links, the more links or messages and things that will pop up in your Facebook feed. So it almost curates it for you. It knows what types of stories you'll click on, and that's why it's called clickbait, because it wants your click. And it's things like man hugs dolphin, or what happens next will blow your mind, or 3 facts about oranges that will change your life forever. What that little kid could do with a tin can will amaze you. So these are all like headings. When you click on them, you're quite often very disappointed anyway. So you actually don't get an answer to the headline that sucked you in the first place. And as I said, I've definitely been caught out clicking on links on Facebook like that. And a lot of the time you have to subscribe or keep clicking on different pages to get the story, and you get pop-ups, and it all gets rather frustrating. So it's very unrewarding, I'll say that. And you've got sponsored content. It's worth mentioning here that it can be classed as spam, but mostly sponsored content's paid for by the company that's putting the message out. They want to get the message out further, so they'll boost the posts, we call it, where you pay money and they'll randomly send it to different people. You can be really targeted with your audience. And so if I've always looked at libraries and stuff on my Facebook page, I'm more likely to get sponsored links about libraries. So it's very curated. And then we've got obviously the satire and the hoax, which I did speak about briefly before. They're 2 slightly different types of news. One is more like the sketch comedy that you get, like the comics in the newspaper. It's usually commenting on a real world event, but it's got a bit of a humorous look at it, sometimes not funny for the people involved, I would say. Some TV shows fall into this category of satire too, like The Office or South Park. That's just to name 2. And sometimes with that, so that's all satire, but then you've got the hoax, and it's totally made up and it's designed as a joke. But unfortunately, we do have people in the community that sometimes can believe it's real, and that's where we get into problem. And satire, which used to, and hoaxes, which used to be in the paper in the form of the comic strip, it's sort of moved now to be more memes. So we all share memes. I've been very guilty of sharing memes, but that is a form of fake news in the sense that it fits under satire and hoax. Then we have error, which is just quite stated, it's simply stated it's an error. So even newspapers get it wrong sometimes. They get information that's not quite accurate, and they publish it, unfortunately, before it's been checked. Most reputable news outlets now employ fact checkers to check everything before it's published, and this is a way that they safeguard themselves from being caught out in that way. There are other techniques used in fake news, such as bias techniques that are more subtle, and they do this by omitting the facts so that you only get half the story. Labeling is another way. So in a group photo, say if you've got a photo of politicians, and they might only name some of the politicians, and that makes the other politicians not look important. Or they might call the group experts, giving them more importance than what they really have. So that's all different ways that you can slant public perception to change. It's very, very subtle. Sometimes people, you can gloss over and not pick it up. So sometimes it can be as subtle as a placement where the article is located in the newspaper. That also plays a role in how you view that article. And sources, always look out for the sources, see if the sources are included in the article, where they got the information from, so that you can check it. So this is how fake news used to look. We might move that down. I can't. Yeah, so this is how fake news used to look. We all remember that in the newspapers. Note I said most people, because not everyone reads newspapers. So it's very easy to spot this type of fake news. now with social media, most people have some type of account or they're online. So fake news is more easily spread because more people are seeing it. Whereas a newspaper, you know, it was hit and miss whether you read the newspaper and saw it. Even if you don't stop and show interested in an article, like if you're scrolling for your Facebook feed and you don't stop and you just, you know, you're scrolling through, your brain is already soaking up the information, even if you've disproved it or you're not interested in it. Your brain is always active and always picking things up. So your brain is always getting filled with junk, which is not good. Not when we need all our brain power for everything else we're doing in that day. So this is, I thought this was a really interesting picture. So the first photo is the child sleeping, and it was reported as being sleeping near his deceased parents' grave in Syria. But the picture was completely staged because the child knew the photographer and the graves did not even belong to his parents. Although this type of photography is still completely heartbreaking, it's, you know, there is some graves there. We're not dismissing the fact the graves are there, but it does prove that you can't trust everything you see online. This photo was taken in 2014 as part of an art project. And the photographer, he took the photos for his art, but the photos were then used later on for fake news. And even though the photographer did try to speak out about it, it was too late because the photo had gone viral. And as I've said earlier, images do speak louder than words. Here's some more pictures that are mislabeled or misconstrued. This picture went viral of a caged child, but believe it or not, it's a detention centre. It's not a detention centre, which is what the news tried to depict it as. It was of a protest. So the protest was about Trump's administration policy of separating immigrant children from their parents. This was in 2018. The photo was used later to show children in detention being locked up, but it was a mislabeled photo. This is where Google images and Google reverse image search is very useful. So Jacinta is now going to demonstrate this for you. I'll just let her
Thanks, Angela.
Yes, right.
So I'm going to take you to Google Images. So this is just a part of an aspect of Google. You can find Google Images. And I actually have the photo that Angela has just showed you in that slide in my documents. So I'm going to take that photo and drag it into Google Images. And this is going to show us some more of images of that particular photo, but it's going to also bring up different articles. So if you can see here, it's got the written testimony, it's got fact check, and it's got other articles that have been linked to that particular image. So that's just something which you can do through Google, taking an image and doing a reverse search to find what that image might have been linked to hopefully try and find the fact check in what an image or an article has used. So I will hand back over to Angela.
Thank you, Jacinta. Okay, so this was another picture of the same day. And as you can see, the boy is running free outside of the cage. Obviously, you can see in that picture that it was a demonstration. It would have been good if the person relabeling this picture had actually checked the facts first through reverse images before it was shared. So it's really important that we take away from today that we are actually part of the fake news syndrome that's happening, and we can always also cut it down and stop it from just going out of control, going viral like it does. So just by Googling images, Googling the image, you can see where it came from originally. So sometimes photos are misconstrued. Again, this is often in a time of unrest or stress. Like the first picture is, it was in the newspaper saying that this is how the coronavirus is going to spread. But what it actually is airline routes, a list like a map of airline routes. You can imagine if you saw that in the paper, you'd be very scared. The second picture was of a road accident in 2016, but this picture was used in 2020 to demonstrate the lengths people will go to get toilet roll during the outbreak of coronavirus. So people actually believed that a truck had been hijacked to get the toilet paper. I mean, it was pretty dire for a little while there, but I don't think it was that dire. At the end of the day, a mislabeled or misconstrued photo, it just means that someone's used it incorrectly and they haven't checked their facts. And it is designed to, well, we look at that picture and we think, yeah, that's rubbish. How we're going to, like, you know, it's just, we have to be more savvy in how we interpret the information that we see. We can process it differently, basically. So in this next section, we're going to discuss why fake news is spreading. But before I move on, I wanted to talk about the filter bubble. As I said before, right at the beginning, I did feel a bit like Alice going into the rabbit hole with all these new terms and these new words coming into my head. And I didn't realize how big fake news was and all of the things that contribute to fake news. So the filter bubble, if you haven't heard about this before, is very interesting because it says that the filter bubble is a situation in which an internet user encounters only information and opinions that conform to and reinforce their own beliefs, which is what I was talking about before when our Facebook friends are becoming our news editors about what we see, news managers. So this is often caused by algorithms that personalize an individual's online experience. We can all see that with our Facebook feeds, because we see every Facebook feed out there is different because it's personalized to you. So it's very personalized, and eventually this personalization will see, I think, in the future, it will actually isolate individual users into their own filter bubbles. That's what filter bubble means. You're just seeing things that align with you. So would you only see things of interest and the things that you believe in? And you might think that's really great because, you know, why do you want to see other people's point of view? It's your social media feed. This is me. This is what I want to see. But these types of bubbles, they don't show any opposing views, and that means that over time our images our thoughts get distorted, and our understanding of the world will change, and it will hamper our ability to make balanced decisions. So over time, this filter bubble will take away people's ability to understand different perspectives and ultimately take away our empathy and ability to make informed decisions. Filter bubbles, and it's not fake news, but they can certainly contribute to fake news. And there are things we can do to limit the spread of filter bubbles, and we will chat about that a bit later as well. It's just, as I said, it's not a fake news thing, but it's just worthwhile mentioning that there's lots of different aspects that contribute towards fake news. So, as I've said before, we are a lot of the problem of fake news. We are like the good and evil, and which one will win out today? So we're always, it's a balancing act. So how many of us have been somewhere, felt shocked by something, taken a photo to use on social media? Have you thought about why you're taking that photo? What do you intend to achieve by it? See, if you always think that before you share anything on social media, we would cut down on a lot of things that go viral. So by doing this, we're sharing in the publishing of fake news. We want to shock people, tick, because that's often one of the things. Fake news wants to shock you. It's often an emotional topic. Tick, yep, it's emotional. It can be misleading. Tick, yep, it's misleading. Earlier in the year, I went shopping and was totally shocked that the meat aisle was empty. I'd never seen the meat aisle empty before, and I immediately took a photo. And afterwards, I thought, why did I take that photo? Well, the answer is I was going to put it on Facebook. I didn't, of course, because I thought I'm promoting panic buying, and that was a problem earlier in the year. And we don't want to look like we're contributing to anything like that. So luckily for me, I saw reason and I didn't share my photo. So some other causes of fake news and why it's such a problem is viral. So we all know how quickly things can spread on the internet. Believe it or not, not everything online is generated by a person. Obviously, there was a person somewhere in the mix, but algorithms are a lot to blame. An algorithm is a computer program that gives the internet some kind of order. It assists in the ranking of pages so that when you do a search, it determines what order the pages will show. The scary thing about an algorithm is especially in social media, it is programmed to show you only your news feed and what is relevant to you instead of articles published in time. It's published in a bit of an order of what they think you're going to want to see. So that's why, you know, loads of people complain they don't see everything in their social media feed. It's because the algorithm is making it personalized to what it thinks you want to see, not a date or time order, which can be very problematic. So the social medias especially prioritize which content a user sees in their newsfeed first, by the likelihood of them clicking on that link. We as humans share fake news often because it's an emotive issue for us. We have less time to fact check in this age that we're in now. We are in the age of instant gratification. No one wants to wait anymore for anything, which is why clickbait is so prevalent. The old favourite is you never guess what happened next, and we all want to know what happened because we're very curious creatures too. So you have to look at reasons why fake news is spreading. And as I said, some of it is about us as well. A lot of it's about us, let's face it. We should teach this in all our schools, all our young kids, so that when they go into the adult world, they're just as tech savvy online as they are in person. So after hearing everything I've said today, you may be feeling a little overwhelmed and feel like there's nothing you can do. But as I've just said, it's untrue. There are a lot of things that you can do. For example, with filter bots, we can now do the following. You can use ad blocking browser extensions that stop you having any ads popping up. You can read news sites and blogs that provide a wide range of perspectives. You can switch our focus from entertainment to education. You can use incognito browsing. This deletes the search history, and you can log out of pages that you're using. So you can getting confused with my words. Incognito is a way to search, because Google keeps all your browsing history. If you don't want your history to be saved, you can use incognito. And you might think, well, why do I care? Well, have you ever had the experience where you search for something on Google and then for weeks afterwards in your Facebook news feed, you have pop-ups or ads appearing with the exact thing you searched in Google for? Well, to stop that from happening, you can use incognito. You can delete or block your browser cookies. And these tips, even though they're not directly fake news, are all things that can help stopping the spread of fake news. Don't forget, if you have any questions, pop them in the Q&A and we can answer all your questions later. Other things to combat fake news. If you're unsure of a heading, it's a really good tip to try and verify outside the source you're in. For example, if you're on a website or Facebook page, go to another page, Search Google or for other stories about the same subject. Don't just rely on that one article. You can do a reverse Google image search, which Jacinta just showed you. You can check for misspellings or odd-looking URLs. These are some of the oddities that often appear with fake news. You look for things like caps being all on or lots of extra exclamation points. I love exclamation points, by the way, so a lot of my writing has exclamation points, but it is also a sign that you can look out for fake news. Is it a well-known source? And the difference between a well-known source and a fake news site, how it looks. So there's a site called Before It's News, which has been known to publish fake news. And then, so that's an example of a fake news site. And then there's the Washington Post example where, most of their news is pretty good. So when you click on this site, the pop-ups often happen and things like that happen. So Jacinta is going to show you the difference between these two sites and also show you how incognito looks as well. Let's wait for Jacinta to share her page.
Thanks, Angela. So here I've got Before It's News, and you can already see there is a lot of pop-ups here. So I'm going to say no thanks and cross that one. So we've already been flooded with different pop-ups and things that it's trying to share. And then on the page, when we've got Before It's News, you can see as we go down, we have got quite a lot of clickbait here. We've got lots of exclamation marks. We've got I Killed Bruce Lee. We've got powerful things that you can buy. Here you can buy it. We've got different personalities and celebrities being used to in a headline. So there's lots of different instances of controversial headings, false connections, and things like that are being used for current news that's being used controversially. So this is Before It's News, where we can see lots of bad instances of clickbait and of fake news. Then I'm going to take you to the Washington Post. And if you see here, as we scroll down, well, there's a lot happening on the page at the moment. It has a much more streamlined appearance, and there's very few, we've got an ad here, but there's very few ads in comparison to Before It's News. So we've got those two different websites, and as you can see here, this one looks far more genuine looking than everything that was happening on the other page. There was lots of colour, lots of headings, lots of headlines. So we've got this one here, and also you can see the authors are being attributed to the different articles as well. Now I'm going to show you how you can bring up an incognito search, as Angela mentioned earlier. This is something which you can use as well. So I'm using Google Chrome, and on Google Chrome here, if you see those three dots right in the top right hand corner, these three dots here, I'm going to click those. And then if you see here, we've got new incognito window. Otherwise, you've also got Control, Shift, and N. So if you hold those three keys down at the same time, it's going to bring up an incognito window. So I think I'll need to swap over here to then show you what this looks like. So this is what the incognito search looks like. And some of the advantages, like Angela mentioned, is that your browsing history, your cookies and site data won't be able to be seen afterwards. So as well as any information entered in forms. So that's the benefit of that one there. So I'll hand back over to Angela, but if you do have any questions, please ask them through the Q&A feature, and I'll pass them on to Angela then.
Okay, sorry about that. My mouse was not working. So this section here talks about resources, tips and techniques. Viral information is on the rise, as we know. Conspiracy theories, fake photos, inaccurate news and dangerous news. We must always be doing something to combat it. Fake news is one part of media literacy. Some countries are doing a lot in this area in schools, and their citizens are much better informed and are able to combat issues quicker. We are now in the era where fake news and scams are being called scamdemic or infodemic. When you think about 2020 for Australia, we've had the bushfires and COVID, which has created a climate of fear, and this is aiding in spreading of fake news. So media literacy, which is sort of like, I'd call it the umbrella term for all of this. Media literacy is the ability to critically engage with media in all aspects of life. It is a form of lifelong literacy that is essential for full participation in society. So it's very important that we start talking about fake news and media literacy a lot more than what we are doing now. So here are some fact-checking resources that I've found to be very good, but by no means is all there is. There's lots of other things. So you'll see the ABC fact check. This determines the accuracy of claims, usually by politicians, public figures, advocacy groups and institutions, which are engaged in some public debate. Then we've got Snopes. You may have heard of this if you're in a school, because Snopes is often used. This is one of the oldest sites that I've used a lot. And it's mostly used for researching urban legends, folklore, myths, rumour, misinformation. We've got Google Images, which we've already discussed. PolitiFact is a fact-checking website that rates the accuracy of claims by elected officials and others on its truthometer. So it's a bit of fun as well. The Conversation, that's still there. This is a great site that is curated by professional editors. The Conversation offers informed commentary and debate on the issues affecting our world. The AFP site is Australian Federal Police. It's a website that gives public access to the AFP's view in relation to publicised issues involving their organisation. The Australian Media Alliance, Literacy Alliance, is an unincorporated group of organisations whose objectives in the area of media literacy are closely aligned. This is a really good one. It's got lots of resources on it that you can access. And MediaWise has the aim to empower people of all ages to be more critical consumers of content online. So as I said before, there's many sites that you can see. On my next page, there's more tools, and I will send all these out to people. Lots of, sorry, my screen is off my page. I'll go back, sorry, because I'm in Zoom and I forgot that I couldn't use all my page, but I will send this out. So there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes to combat fake news. For instance, Google are using more machine learning programs and algorithms than ever before to detect bad content. Last year, 11.4 million videos were taken down off the internet, and 10.8% of these, no, 10.8 million, which is 95%, were detected by a machine. Only 5 of them were reported by humans. So even though, as I said earlier, algorithms and bots and machines are being used to spread fake news, they're also being used to combat it. Lots of organisations are working towards a common goal of educating our community about media literacy. There's the Alana and Madeline Foundation that have an online site called Media Literacy Lab for Young People. There's NewsGuard, which helps you to decide what news to trust. Common Sense Media is a leading source of entertainment and technology recommendations for families. I've used it before with my kids when they've wanted to, like in the early days of wanting to go on Minecraft and things like that. There's Media Bias Fact Check. It's a comprehensive resource on the internet that will check media bias. And obviously That's Nonsense is exploring just that, nonsense. Milliclicks is the one I like, and there is some really good video clips on Milliclicks. It's a Facebook page, but I will send you some links to that. And they're really advocating for spreading less fake news and other things. The Pew Research Centre is a think tank that informs the public about issues, attitudes and trends that shape the world. And Who is, it's a lookup domain, so you can, if you know a domain name, you can look it up and see who owns it. And Who Makes the News is a knowledge of information, a resource portal that focuses on, often focuses on gender and other discrimination that's seen in media and communication. And of course, we have to, the tiny URL there is the Parliament of Australia, because the URL was quite large. And it has a really good snapshot of what's happening around the world in the area of fake news. So it's got lots of links on their page that you can look at. And obviously, right at the bottom is the E-Safety Commissioner. That's a really good site full of resources for students and different situations that may arise, what to do in this situation or that situation, not just focusing on fake news, but a really good resource for all young people out there. I went back the wrong way, sorry, go back. So we get to this part, which is near the end, and we talk about the consequences of fake news. Like, is it really important? Do we really care that fake news is spread? Well, it is a really big concern, and the Australian government are investing a lot of money to combat it. Fake news is said to have influenced the 2016 presidential election. It affected the UK Brexit referendum. Fake news has also been connected with the persecution of minority groups around the world. Around the world, laws have been enacted against spreading fake news online. Social media platforms spend a lot of money each year trying to prevent fake news from being shared. And there are a lot of media literacy campaigns to combat it. And there's lots of different websites and organisations doing their part to try and stop fake news. But we all have to do our part too. We all have to stop, think, take a breath. Do we need to share that picture? Do we need to fact check it? What can we do? So the consequences, as you can see from them pictures, fake news can cause panic buying. Back when COVID first started, everyone thought we were going to run out of toilet paper. And this was the result. That was my picture of my local shop. And I was shocked that there was no toilet paper. But there is obviously enough to go around. We've got a factory in Australia, a couple of factories. We weren't going to run out. We certainly weren't going to die from having no toilet paper, even though it would have been horrible. When the bushfires were happening in Australia, there were lots of fake photos shared, as we talked about earlier. And people often donated money to fake organisations. So that's the other part of it. People lose money because they were running scams. Fake news can be very distressing, which is also worsening our mental health and our resilience of all of our community. Australia's bushfires, people reported that Australian bushfires were started by arsonists. That wasn't true. Well, not all of them anyway. And that gave people a complacency as well around bushfires. And some of the other bizarre claims is the latest one I saw was the coronavirus has been found in energy drinks. Well, that's false. And what about this one? Fake news can be downright dangerous. People self-medicating with bleach or chlorine to prevent them getting sick. There have been people that have actually tried this and the results haven't been good. A few people have died in America, especially, that have tried this to clear their body of COVID. So fake news, the consequences can be really hard to deal with. In fact, and when you think about it, we are in the age at the moment of a biological pandemic, but we're also in a digital pandemic. Fake news, and they're very similar, they've got parallels, these two things. Fake news spread just as quick as, digital pandemic spreads just as quick as the biological pandemic. And it can kill people too if the wrong information is shared. But unlike a pandemic, which can be solved with a vaccine, fake news is harder to combat. And of course, the very last slide is probably the most important one, reporting fake news. So we've talked about lots of ways where we can prevent it or fact check it, not share it. But actually when you see it, reporting it is really good. So most social media sites now have a report button, and whereas before they had different options like why you're reporting it, fake news is one of these reasons now, which is really good. There's lots of challenges associated with fake news. They're very complex. There's overlapping issues with fake news too, like it involves cybersecurity and national security. It involves our privacy, our electoral integrity, media and advertising standards. It's not always transparent. And we have got this issue with media literacy and being more literate and social media. So there is lots of ways to report it. There's the cyberlink.gov.au where you can report, plus on all of the YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, you can report there too, LinkedIn. And lastly, check out the World Health Organization's page. That bit at the top, the blue bit, that's on the World Health Organization's page, and they're actually clickable links. So if you have an issue with a Facebook or Instagram, you could click on their link and report it there that way as well. So that comes to the end of my formal presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to just click over and see if there's any questions or any comments people want to make from the from anyone out there. I'll see if there's anything in the chat. So yeah, someone wrote a good comment also. Newspapers feature articles written by journalists with consideration of legal concerns. Online, anyone can write the news, whereas in a newspaper, they are trained to think about legislation and things like that. And what else is there? There is. Yeah, that's good. So I will let you all know that I will send out all the links I've talked about. I will send out to you guys. And if there's no questions now, but if you do have questions down the track, you can always email me and we can go from there. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Jacinta, for co-hosting with me today. It's been awesome.
Thank you, Angela, for your informative presentation.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. And don't forget, don't share. Don't share them links. Fact check everything. Bye.
Bye.